Disgraced Riley police officer Omar Abdullah came to Wake County Court Wednesday prepared to accept some responsibility for his decision to wrongfully charge a black man with trafficking heroin. Abdullah was sentenced to 38 days in jail and 2 years of probation after he pled guilty to a single obstruction of justice charge. That Class H felony could have resulted in up to a 19-month prison sentence for him. Abdullah and his defense attorney, Ryan Willis, argued that Abdullah shouldn't serve time behind bars, explaining the fire detective's concerns for the first time publicly. A scheming confidential informant took advantage of Abdullah's hard charging nature and desire to be a good detective, and other Riley detectives and supervisors in the drug and vice unit were partially responsible for the trouble that ensued. From October of 2019 to May of 2020, Abdullah worked with a confidential informant, Dennis Williams. Williams was recruited to be a confidential informant after he was caught selling drugs to another confidential informant. Williams was given the code name Aspirin by Abdullah and his colleagues. After investigators learned that the drugs he sold, the informant turned out to be aspirin. Williams, who was typically associated with lower level drug deals, learned that he can earn more money from police as a confidential informant from drug deals that involved heroin. Under the supervision of Abdullah, Williams sought heroin trafficking arrest. The developing pattern of negative drug tests should have made Abdullah suspicious about Williams. The situation came to a head in May of 2020. Williams contended that he purchased heroin from Marcus Varvin on May 21st of 2020, which resulted in Varvin's house being raided and searched by police before he was charged with trafficking heroin. During the buy, Abdullah once again ignored red flags, including Williams covering the camera during a purchase and Williams only paying $60 for heroin that was worth much more. Back at the office, an officer commented that the alleged heroin looked more like brown sugar. Another officer field tested the substance and crossed out a trafficking heroin charge when the test came back negative. Abdullah, who was the lead detective, instructed another officer to charge Varvin with trafficking heroin anyway. At this point, there had been about 15 different drug sales involving Williams and Abdullah, and the drugs submitted as evidence came back negative 3 different times. The drug informant, Williams, who faces 5 pending charges of obstructing of justice, would tell police he was purchasing heroin but was actually using their money to buy marijuana. He would then provide police with the counterfeit heroin substance. Cases about Abdullah surfaced in early 2020 after a defense attorney representing men arrested by the detective brought questions about false drug evidence to Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman. By September 2020, Riley Police and Freeman were investigating cases of false evidence in more than a dozen drug cases. Abdullah was placed on administrative leave during the investigation and was fired about a year later. But details of the scandal didn't surface until April of 2021 when People, Abdullah, had arrested filed a 24-page federal lawsuit accusing the detective of conspiring with a confidential informant to send more than a dozen black men to jail and prison in a fake heroin scheme. The lawsuit included individuals who faced charges of possessing and trafficking heroin, and in one case, a marijuana charge, but substances provided by a police informant turned out fake again and again. About a dozen men spent a collective 2.5 years behind bars before their charges were dismissed. They lost jobs and missed cancer treatments and time with their children. The city of Riley didn't admit fault but settled the case for $2 million within 5 months. The lawsuit also alleges that there are many signs and problems with Williams's actions, but Abdullah's colleagues and bosses didn't take any action, which echoed Abdullah's concerns. A second federal lawsuit was filed in February of 2022. The lawsuit contends that Abdullah and others conspired to fabricate heroin trafficking offenses that led to an illegal raid, excessive force, and false imprisonment of 10 black women and children. City officials settled the lawsuit in June, agreeing to pay 3 families a total of $350,000. A third lawsuit filed in June of 2022 against the city. Abdullah and two of the officers alleged that Abdullah and another official planted 36 grams of narcotics on David Weaver in 2018 after he refused an offer to be a confidential informant. That case was voluntarily dismissed. So the city allowed Abdullah, who was the lead detective on the case, the head of everything, to get a drug dealer pretty much off the streets, or maybe he was locked up, and they allowed him to be an informant on the taxpayers' dime on the police payroll. Williams, who was the informant slash drug dealer, decided that he wanted to, you know, kill two birds with one stone. He wanted to still be a drug dealer, but he was doing it legally under the guise of being a police informant with the police. He would swap out the quote unquote heroin for other substances such as brown sugar or aspirin, take the money, swap it, and then buy marijuana. Right? So, still doing everything that he wants to do and making even more money while also doing it while being under the cover of being a police informant so that he couldn't get arrested, couldn't get prosecuted because people are gonna be like, well, he's an informant, he's just, probably working the case or doing his job or XYZ. So the police are gonna pretty much leave him alone. But while doing this, Williams and Abdullah were wrecking shop in the black community by pretty much planting or setting up black men during these quote unquote buys, giving them fake narcotics so that they could in turn get arrest, get prosecution, and strip these black men of 2.5 years of their lives, and more than likely maybe getting some other type of kickbacks as well. I'm talking about both for Abdullah and the informant. And then later on, you heard how other officers that were actually the good ones, right, were doing their job. They were like, you know what? Maybe we should take a second and slow down and look over this case real quick, see if, there are any details that we are missing, some corrections that need to be made. And once they went over all of the details and they tested some of the substances there, they found out that pretty much all of the substances there were not what they were supposed to be. They were supposed to be drugs, but they weren't drugs. They were aspirin or brown sugar. They didn't come back positive for any type of narcotics at all. So then that leads to the question, why are these men even being arrested on such flimsy evidence? But that again tells you how it is that the court systems and the prosecutors work when it deals with black men and the black community. As long as they are able to prosecute, as long as they are able to get somebody to fill those seats in those beds, in the jails and in the prisons, that's the only thing that matters. Even if it comes to the effect that all of the evidence is forged or it's fake or that there were lies given in order to ascertain the bodies that they need to fill those jails and those prisons, it doesn't matter. Again, the city of Riley stated that, hey, we're not going to take the blame. We're not going to accept, responsibility for any of this. It just is what it is. So we're not going to say that we were wrong, say that we were right, but we're going to give out a little bit of money. Right, a little bit of money. That's what black people want. We're gonna give you a little bit of money. You spent 2 years, so we're going to give out $2 million. But it wasn't like they gave $2 million out to each one of these black men. They gave out a general fund of $2 million, and then that was supposed to be split in between all of the black men that were falsely accused and arrested and had to spend 2.5 years of their lives away from their jobs, not being able to get cancer treatment, having to deal with everything that comes with being in jails and in prisons that doesn't get talked about when these men get released. On top of the fact for any type of medical that they have to go through, such as therapy, or now trying to figure out a new living situation or trying to fix relationships. And now they also have to use that money to deal with lawyer fees. Like I said, this is a highly calculated move by way of the city to know the fact that this money is not going to go a long way. It's not going to fix or solve the problem. And that pretty much those men have a record and they're going to have to do their due diligence in order to get it expunged, which means that that is more money that is going to have to get taken out of which they already don't have. Again, this is a very calculated move by the state, and this is how every single state in the United States acts whenever it is that they are found to have done any type of wrongdoing when it deals with black men. And then later on, you hear what happened, how they had these raids that happened, and how it is that they went directly into the homes of black women. And nine times out of 10, chances are that these black women have kids. How do you think that that made those kids feel? How do you think that their sons reacted to these raids? How do you think that their sons, their little boys, were treated during these raids that happened due to the fact of Abdullah? Like I said, this is how the black family is broken apart, is disassembled, is attacked, right? They attacked us, a two-pronged attack. And they've been doing this so long, they have pretty much perfected it to the point that if anything happens in the black community, people are going to be like, oh, well, those people probably did something. They deserved it. I'll hold my judgment until more information comes out. But as stated before, and I'm going to state again, the moment in time that you have officers like Abdullah that are directly on the force and they're allowed to masquerade as law officers, right? As oath carriers. And they're given all of these privileges, all of these rights. This is why they continuously tell people that no one man should have all that power. This is what that looks like. Omar Abdullah is a key example of one man having all and too much power and going around to never be checked. Because if he was checked in the beginning, he would have never have made it this far. Nor would you have had so many people that would have had such a negative life experience or interaction with Abdullah as well.